Hey, this is Voo, and I've become so frustrated with the way people are playing Dust 2 that I wanted to make a video on it. You suck at playing Dust 2, and here's how to fix it. Now, when I say you, I do mean you watching the video currently, although if you've seen all of the videos on my channel, perhaps you're not quite as bad. The first issue I see is on this A side. There are definitely issues in mid and B, but the most common and obvious flaw is when someone calls I play cat. You don't. When you play Dust 2, you have 3 A players and a mid player and a B player. You don't have a cat player and a long player. You have 3 players that fight over long, and cat is option B. Now, there are delineations in the way you play A. You'll usually have a long anchor, someone that will go somewhere like pit or corner or whatever, and stay long after you take it. You'll usually have the car player, typically an opper, and you'll have the rotator who will play, maybe elevator or plat, or, he might end up going up on cat at some point during the round. Oftentimes, if you lose long, he'll definitely be the player that's pretty aggressive on cat, but usually both rifles will end up over here. Now, the way you take long really varies. The most obvious and optimal way to play long is you have your best spawn, which is the only spawn that will beat all T spawns to the corner. He's going to run up to the corner here and quickly molly into the doors. He's going to turn back, and he's going to get flashed out by this player back here, which would be the opper throwing a flash like that. And the second player would be sitting backwards the entire time, and after that flash pops, he swings with the other player. So one of them swings out to here, the other one swings out, maybe a little bit wider trying to get into pit. If the opponents are hard contesting long, this second player would be hearing the flashes come over, spin around. He can toss a molly like that, which is going to molly off behind blue bin. It'll push people out, prevent them from actually sitting in there. Optimally, you want to make sure you throw it. Optimally, you want to make sure you throw it deep enough so that it actually gets blooper. Cut. Optimally, you want to throw it deep enough so you can actually get it in behind blue bin and nobody can go out there, which is going to really shut down any sorts of long play. So if you have some level of coordination, the first spawn throws the molly, this second spawn is ready to throw a molly of his own in towards blue bin, and the third spawn, or the opper, would be ready to throw a flash high to the left for them to swing off of, and usually you'd want to be able to throw 2. The reason you want that behind is so that they can swing, and a second flash can land behind as they're fighting and not blind them. Now, if things are going a little bit differently, if you're a little bit more on your own here, there are some variations you can have. If the opper is not ready or willing to throw that flash, you can throw your own makeshift flash like this, jumping and throwing it off of that wall there. It's going to land in front, but it certainly can be effective. You can throw that, or you can do something like double click a flash high to the left there. But the part of the benefit of throwing this one is you're turned away from enemy flashes until this one pops. So you throw it like that, and you can even swing out with it if there's a smoke down and come around it. Now, the reason I'm giving you a ton of options here is because long is that important. So here's another option is if your opponents are smoking off this corner very often, you can throw a wrench in the works by throwing a smoke like that. That smoke is going to block off the middle here, and it's not exactly a perfect smoke. However, that smoke will give you a bit of a gap to get into pit and try and fight around from there, and it can be a little bit more complicated for Ts to deal with, especially if they're uncoordinated, if you're given free cover to get into pit. It's a little bit awkward, but it actually does work quite well. Another thing you can do is I've actually seen teams throw their own corner smoke, something like this. And what that corner smoke is going to do is you get it to land a little bit out further than the typical one. If your opponents aren't throwing corner smokes, they're just hard flashing over and running out. Sometimes you can use this type of smoke as well as a right-clicked flash into the smoke, something like this, just to give you free cover to cross into pit. It gives you a little bit extra cover on that corner. You throw it a little bit deeper so that because it's deeper, you can actually have a player come around to the right of it a little bit more effectively. If it lands right here with a bit of a gap between it, you can come around the side of this smoke and peek out. It's not perfect, but it's certainly somewhat effective. It gives you a little bit of cover for potentially, if one player is crossing, the other player to throw a molly in towards long doors as well. And especially with that, you can come around to the side and it's quite effective. And it gives, again, the player to get to pit fairly effectively. And he can throw something, a flash of his own to fight with and try and contest on long. So that's a lot of options to try and control long, but it's just really important to understand long is the most important place on the map. Send 3 players there consistently. You even send 4 players there once in a while. If you're losing long consistently, you're really going to struggle on this map. But the things you can do when you lose long, this is another, pretty obviously bad area I see issues come up in. People will have solo long presence, bad. They will run up to here and be getting chain flashed, bad. And they will try and contest it alone, bad. If you are pushed off of long, if your teammates are doing something like playing cat, essentially as soon as there's presence on long, you need to be giving it up and going back. Optimally, you have someone like an op with a great spawn. If you have your op with your first spawn, you can get him to this corner here, take a shot and fall back, get yourself a free kill. But otherwise, you want to be going back as quickly as possible so that you can double up on catwalk. And doubling up on cat is okay. It's not quite as good as long control. However, one of the things I think people do wrong on cat is they stay on cat forever. Now, obviously, this is kind of the danger area. Getting between this corner and out here, it's a very dangerous situation because you could be caught by players running up cat, could be flashed, players could come lower. There's all sorts of potential issues in that specific area around here. However, if you know your opponents are pushing out long, they're throwing a lot of flashes, you'll see one of the hardest things to deal with for T sides is players that try to pick you off in middle. Once it comes to cat control, it's not that hard to take away from the CTs. A flash bounced off the wall here, a molly over here to push back a potential opper. All these things are pretty standardized at this point and fairly easy to deal with. You're going to really struggle to hold on to cat if you do go for it. And by the way, you absolutely need to go for it. You can't hold A without cat or long control. But if you do, in the dreaded scenario, lose long A control and you're going back for cat control, you want to be trying to hold a little bit more aggressive on cat if you can, especially because some players are out long, which means it's less likely and it's going to be tougher for them to deal with you on cat. One of the things you can actually do that most people, don't really know about is smoking off Xbox yourself. One of the most dangerous areas to deal with cat is lower because you're having to look in multiple different directions. However, if you do something like smoke off on Xbox yourself, you can do something like throw a flash over and you can get aggressive and take engagements in middle. Especially if you have a player in middle as a mid player that's willing and able to rotate over and be, aggressive with you, you've now created a very tough time for these Ts to come back and take up cat. What Ts typically want to do when they take long, hold it with an op in pit, and then have your players go back and take cat, because cat is, fairly easy to take if CTs are going to be there. If they give up cat, you get a free split onto the bomb site, and so on. And it's a little bit tougher to actually take up long A because, riflers might be up on plat, there might be an opper here posted up, there might be a rifler rotating elevator. So if you think your opponents are going to be doing something like taking mid control, you can definitely pivot back, pressure them in middle, flashes up over that corner pretty good. You should be able to throw, something like a double click flash. You can try and catch a player in lower as well, just by coming up over here with one player posting up. Maybe the other player looks over to an angle like this. You're trying to catch them in middle if they try and go back for cat. Once you figure out if mid is what they're going for, once, things have settled down, you can even use this to potentially flank or to have a player come over to an angle like this or, over here and trap them inside of long so that you can heavy focus in the other direction. Make sure they're not easily able to come up long onto a plat. And you can use smokes like, a smoke here can sometimes be effective because they have to see around it. It can allow you out to angles like this. A lot of players you'll see throw smokes kind of like this that try and play around it as well. Catch players as they move up onto plat, not ready for this type of angle. All sorts of different positions can be used in this type of spot to hold on to A. But the main idea is long is the angle you play. You don't play cat. That's not a thing. Occasionally you might, throw in a toss-up, you boost up on a cat, you catch your opponents off guard. You're not a cat player. You are not a cat player. It's not a thing. Now, when it comes to mid and B, the biggest issue I see with people is that they try and stick around in middle the entire round. The reality is that once your opponents can be peeking you from lower, you actually realistically have to fall back off of middle. Now, it can be nice to punish opponents in middle if they're lazy, if they're bad, if they're not able to aim back, if they're not peeking you correctly. It can be pretty beneficial to punish them in mid, and if that's the way it's going, fantastic. However, if you're playing competent opponents, they really should be fairly easily pushing you off of these angles. You know, throwing a molly close right, throwing a quick flash over, peeking out off of it, obviously, or they can even double peek you. They can peek you from back up here. They can peek you from close at the same time. They can peek you from up here at the same time. And, you know, once your opponents can come through lower, you know, are you posted up here? Well, they can peek you from down below. Are you posted down below? They can peek you from above. If you're over here, you can get flashed off and they can smoke you off. If you're down here, you know, they can peek you. They can double or triple peek you. It all gets very awkward once they can come out from lower. So if your opponents are competent, you actually have the mid player. He ends up playing essentially B. You end up essentially with two B players, one of them looking mid side, one of them looking B side, and oftentimes you'll have your A player being the rotate over here, ready to support if they come out middle, and you may even have your rotate get into CT spawn or something like that. So typically your main opper ends up being this car player, and you have a rifler towards CT or elevator. He's hoping to be in the right position at the right time. If they come up cat, he wants to be, you know, over on ramp. He wants to be on plat. He wants to be goose. If they go mid to B, he wants to be close over here potentially. But you want to make sure that your mid player early on in the rounds is definitely trying to support B. Usually, one of the easiest ways to support B, your teammate throws the molly, you wait, you toss a nade about 2 seconds into the molly. So if they smoke off the molly, the nade will land as they're smoking it off, and that should be an effective way to hold it. One of the things you want to be doing as well is when you smoke off mid, like so, you want to make sure that you're checking for the fast cat. And to do so, you come to this back wall, jump over the smoke, and go from there. If you see someone fast catting, it's pretty easy. You can toss a molly down there and then post and try and catch them if they go cat. That molly's pretty effective. It prevents people from peeking you over here as easily, prevents anyone running down mid and pushing out on you, and you can post on them when they're coming out cat if you're opping, or even with a rifle, you can throw that molly and maybe come over to a spot like this. Once your opponents are taking long, you either stay middle and contest with your team, or as a mid player, you know, especially if you were B early, and if you're B early, your teammates calling, well, they're flashing out long, double pushing tunnels, also a very effective play to make. You walk double into tunnels. Usually you have this guy on the left holding this angle, the guy on the right jiggling out. If this guy spots someone, starts making contact, this guy pivots and trades. Otherwise, you know, this guy walks out and then spins back and you clear the right corner. And once you've got tons control, you can, again, move around, trap them in long if your teammates want to cover and focus on long, all that sort of thing. You want to make sure you're avoiding too much rotating just straight out of mid doors. You don't want to be doing that every single round. And you don't want your B player just kind of on an island with no other information. That's why double pushing into tunnels is pretty effective, because you make sure that they're not, you know, going to rotate back through T spawn and retake B. And that's another reason that this, you know, play up on cat is so effective. You make sure they're not rotating around cat. You make sure that they're not rotating around towards B either. You get a lot of information out of these plays. But anyways, this video, it was really intended to put out the point that you're playing Dust2 wrong, in that you really need to be playing long A focused. Long A focused. Anyways, thanks for watching, and I hope this helped.